It's just like at class. All right, okay, and welcome everybody. The Allied Arts Council of Lethbridge is proud to acknowledge that Sikokitoki is located in the heart of Siksakatapi, which is the traditional territory of the Blackfoot people from Kainai, Piikani, Siksaka, and Amsakapi, Pikuna regions. We honor and acknowledge the Siksakatapi who have cared for these lands since time immemorial. We recognize that Treaty 7 territory is also home to the Métis people, or Nation of Alberta, Region 3, and many other Indigenous peoples. Acknowledging territory and seeking Niitsitapi perspectives is an opportunity to come together in shared understanding, which is the framework upon which we build a stronger community together. It is an invitation to open a dialogue around our relationship with the history of the place we live in, as well as our responsibilities to the land and the original stewards. Thank you all for joining us today at Casa for our Big Ideas mural panel with April Matisz, Leila Armstrong, Kylie Fineday, and Browne. My name is Katie Bruce, and I am the Public Art Coordinator for the Allied Arts Council of Lethbridge, and I'll be your moderator and host this afternoon. These 4 artists were part of the pilot project that was launched in 2020, along with Haley Heavyshield, Aaron Hagen, and AJ Loudon. Each of these artists contributed to the pilot mural project by bringing their unique artistic talents to Lethbridge and creating incredibly beautiful pieces that contribute to our visual landscape every single day. After several years of limited gathering, we are excited to finally celebrate these pieces with artist talks and the premiere of our mural showcase, which features all the artists on site with their work. If you've not yet made it out to all of the sites, be sure to pick up a public art map as you leave today, so you too can experience these pieces in all their glory. Following the premiere of the artist talks, we'll open the floor to you as the audience to ask questions of the panel. You can direct your questions directly to a specific artist or more broadly to each of them. As you'll see in the film, each of them have incredibly different approaches and practices. So without a further ado, please enjoy this 10-minute presentation created with the help of Arayu Marketing.
The more there's an interaction and the more there's that syntax between people and art and people, I think the better.
Having public art in the city makes the city far more welcoming and far more walkable. You want to be on the street, you want to be around, you want to be looking at things, and it gets people out and about.
My name is AJ Loudon, and I'm an artist, and I'm down here in Lethbridge for the pilot project. So the city has brought in several artists like myself just to create large-scale artworks around the city. So the piece that I created is called Belonging. It depicts a mother and a daughter on a bit of a journey together, looking for a place to call home. And they're looking through space, they're looking through time, and so you can see some sort of allusions to this idea of things from the past and things from the future and things from the present all being mixed together. Some of the ornamentation in the frame, you'll notice that there are symbols in each corner, and each one of these symbols talks about time or space through the lens of a different culture. For a while, I've been thinking and making art about this idea of anachronism, of this sort of cyclical nature of time, and also this idea of, like, as a person of color, being able to see myself in the future and see people that look like me in the future. I grew up in a rural community here in Alberta, and so I didn't see the world around me reflecting a lot of people that look like me, right? Especially in like positions of power or authority. So I wanted to show these 2 black women flying, and obviously like experts or engineers or scientists. When I do stuff like this, or this style of mural that some people might see as like maybe Afrofuturism, that's what I'm trying to connect with, this idea of placing myself and my community in the future and seeing an upward and a positive trajectory for us. And then again, tying back to this idea of belonging, you know, like who belongs here in this place and when, you know, what time do they belong to, but also sort of like at a bigger scale for individual communities and groups of people, like how do we find belonging? That's part of the meaning behind it too.
My name is April Matisz, and this is a mural I painted for the city of Lethbridge, and it's called Dreaming of Future Ecologies. Public art helps to create a really rich and unique community. It activates and energizes us in our own personal way, and then that kind of energy ripples out to the rest of the community. This painting is a meditation on our relationship to the environment. It suggests a kind of a journey that we take where we can imagine and examine our relationship to the planet. And this is a journey that we all take collectively and personally through many generations in local and global landscapes. It was just really fun to work with such bright colors on such a gray wall and have this sort of transformation happen. One thing I really like about this mural and that I tried to consider was I wanted the existing weeds that were already there to sort of really pop. There's something kind of cool about the way that the actual nature that's already there is becoming part of the mural in itself. They're sort of having a conversation together. I hope that when people walk by this mural, it will give them some time to sort of reflect on their own relationship to the environment and what they want our future to look like.
My name is Leila Armstrong, and I'm a local artist here in Lethbridge.
My name is Aaron Hagan, and I am also a local artist in Lethbridge. Leila approached me about collaborating on the mural project, and I said, okay, so we did.
Aaron's an abstract artist, and I do more representational wildlife type art. So we wanted to bring together both of our styles and marry them together, and the result was this mural. We really wanted to do something that would resonate with people in Lethbridge. So I wanted to do an animal that people would be familiar with. I'd done a sketch of a buck, and then Aaron came with this beautiful abstract painting.
I brought like 24 watercolors that I was recently jamming out some different ideas and designs that might work well with this project.
Yeah, and then we really wanted to make it local, like the wildlife. So we chose roughly the colors of a prairie sunset.
I really feel like everybody enjoys art to some extent, whether it's the movies or music. Art is for everyone, right? And so I think public art really takes it out of the private sphere. So this is something that's free.
I think that having public art in the city makes the city far more welcoming. You want to be on the street, you want to be around, you want to be looking at things, and it gets people out and about and talking about different issues, different things that are going on in the city. And I think that that really adds to our overall urban experience.
My name is Browne, and we're standing in front of a wall that I painted. It's a red-shafted northern flicker, and they're a bird that lives here all year round and kind of make their home here, there, everywhere. Very industrious bird. And so, given that I live here and work here and own this place, I see a lot of industrious people living in the alleys and making do with what they have. But besides that, I just wanted it to be colorful, break up this gray space that we live in all the time and add some vibrancy. Yeah. Well, I mean, the facade that was on there before was pretty problematic in terms of vandalism. So the city kind of had a program that would come and paint over it all the time with every different shade of gray or beige that they had. I was really wanting to kind of like change that space and make it something that, you know, wouldn't be attacked in that way. I've been making street art since I was like 15, and it's got sort of a self-governing body to it. And typically when there is nice artwork there, it doesn't actually get touched. It breaks up sort of like the beige landscape and sort of resets your brain a little bit, which is nice. And I love seeing people come do their Instagram posts here. It becomes kind of a physical landscape. Something about the scale of art pieces like this, they just like ignite the imagination, and I'm always inspired to see them. I had people come by and say, you know, like, hey, like, what if people don't like it? And I was like, great, my job is still done. And they're like, what do you mean? It's like, well, I mean, just the fact that they had to go, you know, look up from their phone, change their route to work or whatever, take a look at it and then decide why they didn't like it, you know, they still have to think about it, right? So that's just as important as whether they like it or not.
My name is Kylie Fineday, and I'm an artist working on a mural for the city of Lethbridge. My design is based on the local landscape of southern Alberta with references to specific parts of the coulees and some regional landmarks. I was just inspired by a lot of like the local scenery, a lot of my favorite spots around Lethbridge and in the region. I spend a lot of time in the river bottom, driving through the coulees, and just wanted to kind of put some of these places together to create kind of like a new image that might be interesting to look at. I hope that people see this mural and recognize some of the spots that I'm referencing in it, but also like that it's kind of a bit more fantastical and not really lifelike. I'm using pretty bright colors to kind of make it more graphic and almost cartoon-like, and making the local landscape into sort of like more of like a fantasy realm. Public art is important, I think, because in addition to creating opportunities for artists, I think that having public art in the community kind of helps create a unique identity for a place, and also just makes art more visible and accessible.
Okay, so I would like to introduce our first speaker, April Matisz. April's practice spans a range of media, including drawing, painting, printmaking, ceramics, installation, photography. Earlier this year, she had a solo exhibition at the Southern Alberta Art Gallery entitled Gathering Near and Far Still, which considered ecology, ancestry, and the role of gathering and familiarization. Her work often deals or draws on established knowledge in the sciences, ecologies, and landscapes, while including elements of the individualized experience of motherhood. April's work, Dreaming of Future Ecologies, is located just across the street on the west side of Sisters Pub. Please help me in welcoming April.
Hey everybody, thank you so much Katie, and thanks to the City of Lethbridge and the Allied Arts Council for all of their amazing work in getting this mural pilot project started. So maybe we can go to the first slide and I'll just start talking from there. So as you know, this is the mural that I painted called Dreaming of Future Ecologies. So this was the first outdoor mural I had done. I had done a few other murals, but they were always inside, and so the sense of scale is quite different. So this was a real opportunity for me to learn and challenge myself, which I really enjoyed. Next slide, please. So when I first saw the wall, the one thing really stood out to me, and that was the vegetation against that black wall. And I knew right away that I wanted to keep the first couple feet of the mural black, not just so you get to see the lovely silhouette of the plants, but also because you don't want to be working an inch off the ground, you know, knees on the concrete. So when I first was doing this, I took chalk and was trying to sort of sketch out. You can kind of see a little bit about how the plan starts there with just drawing things out. Before before I started with the painting process, I had to paint the actual image, and so I couldn't really do that any other way besides painting the thing. So here is the original piece here. It's horribly curled, and that was a problem I had when I was actually painting. It was always curling up on me. But what I wanted to do was just sort of show you, if you want to look at this later, come up and check it out, and you can kind of see that there are some changes that do happen in the process. One thing I did was I kind of knew right away that there needed to be lighter spots in the sky. This is still it's still dirty from just getting blown around. I kind of love it. And so I had these elements of collage here where I included some kind of clouds. And then what I had to do with this is I took a photo and then I superimposed it in Photoshop on the wall I was going to paint. And the cool thing about the wall is you can see that there's already a natural grid. So when I was superimposing this image on the wall, I did it with a reduced opacity so you could see that grid, and it made it really easy and nice to sort of draw things on. The creatures at the bottom are a little bit more freehand. So I was a materials nerd, and I did a lot of research about the kinds of paints I wanted to use before doing this, and I settled on Golden. They have a brand of mural paints, and I bought also a UV protective coat that will help keep the colors vibrant for the years to come. The paints are pricey, but their coverage is so good, and they're really vibrant. Next slide, please. So here's just another angle. And this is all the parts that are happening before I got the scaffold. So I was trying to really get moving, and the scaffold took a little bit of time to arrive, and so I was trying to do as much as I could and reach as high as I could to try to get that. Next slide, please. Here you can kind of see where it's coming. Next slide, please. And there is the scaffold. So I loved the scaffold and having this sort of jungle gym surrounding this wall. It was really cool to be able to sort of climb up, and sometimes I would sit on the top with my feet hanging down, and it would just be a very interesting sort of perspective of the city, and you'd be able to sort of still interact with the public when they would walk down. And I was very careful through the process. I did get insurance. There were no injuries. I always made sure to wear proper footwear. One problem is that once you have a scaffold up, it's really hard to step back and see the progress you've made and what it actually looks like. So you do have to kind of trust the process. And one way in which I had to kind of learn this and figure some things out is that most of these are patches of color that sort of extend one level, but then parts like the trees, they have to be the same color all the way up, and there was a lot of sort of repainting to try to make sure it matched from one level to another, because otherwise you'd get this kind of weird choppy gradient. So in order to make the process a little more efficient, I would tend to sort of do blocks of colors at one time, and it would typically be I'd be working with the greens, and then the next patch of green had a yellower hue to it. So then I would add yellow to the thing and be working with that. Then I would be adding more blue to it for a different kind of green, and this kind of back and forth. And a lot of it too, the colors that I'm choosing are responding to the surrounding colors. And so I might make them darker or brighter depending on what works well, not necessarily following the original plan. Next slide, please. So here's a shot down the scaffold. It's about maybe a 2.5 foot wide walking area that you have. You can see the grid quite nicely at this point, and there's something I found really satisfying about the juxtaposition with the grid and then these like really kind of gentle organic lines. One thing is that as the light changed throughout the day, it would sometimes become quite difficult because the texture and the shadows on the wall itself would make it quite distracting and hard to see if you were getting a good flat color. It was also really hot this summer. There was like a crazy heat wave, and that was some other challenges. The nice thing about this is you can see it's in the shade. So I had some extra shade, and I would sort of like do certain parts at certain times of the day to make myself the most comfortable. But when it was really hot, what happens is the wall itself heats up. And then when you're trying to paint on a hot wall, the paint just gets really gummy. It sort of dehydrates really quickly, and you just can't work anymore. Next slide, please. So I have some sort of close-ups here. And so you'll get a sense of the color palette that I'm using for the most part of this mural. It's earthy tones with these sort of pops of color. And a lot of the time the colors are, these pops of color are quite arbitrary, and that adds to the sort of magic, realism, dreamscape sensibility of this work. The design contains a lot of plant forms, and that's something that I've always features quite prominently in my work. I have a background in biology, and I'm someone who likes to go out and sort of identify plants and bring ID books with me when I go into the mountains. My husband can attest that I'll go to the nature centers wherever we're camping and like stock up on all the brochures to identify things. And so I have a sort of repository of plant-like forms in my brain that I'm drawing from. One thing that was kind of challenging in a really fun way was painting around various conduits and whatnot. So you can kind of see that this boat has this a conduit that sort of comes out and down the wall, and trying to sort of make it work when you're straight on was fun, but then also you can't make it work from all angles, and so you get these sort of weird interruptions, which I think are kind of cool. Next slide, please. So here you can see another one of those conduit bars. But again, I thought it was really fun to sort of paint over that and get quite exacting with the brush. Next slide, please. So here's a shot looking up. One thing that, so I tended to kind of keep most of the forms a solid color, and then there's a bit of a challenge with scale here because you have to have some visual interest, but at different levels. And so I'll have these like really big features that are quite sort of sparse with details, and then I'll have little areas that are a bit more interested, and trying to kind of move the viewer's eyes throughout the scene. Next slide, please. So this is a strange kind of forest. It's like I mentioned before, there's a sense of dreaminess, of magic realism. You know, it's kind of nighttime, but kind of not. There are these clouds in the forest, which wouldn't normally occur, but there's something kind of playful about this idea of forests themselves producing oxygen and respiring water vapor, and that is producing clouds. So this could be a kind of cloud-producing forest, I suppose. I really liked that there was already like a black band at the very, very top of this wall. You can kind of see a shadow. It's actually another conduit pipe. It's not like a part that comes out from the wall, but from this angle it kind of looks a bit different. But the black at the top and the black at the bottom had a nice kind of grounding effect. It worked quite well. Next slide, please. Whoops, I showed you this one already, sorry. Next one. Okay, and here is the finished mural again. So this photo was taken about a month or so ago. You'll recall in the video that the plants along the bottom were much smaller at the time, and I just love how much they've grown and how well it seems to mesh with the landscape. There are some sort of creatures, some skunks traveling in here. I know we have at least one skunk fan in the audience. And I like that they're almost barely visible, like they're sort of these secret creatures. And if you were to come close to the mural and spend some time with it, you're sort of rewarded with being able to see more than if you were just looking at it from a distance. Sisters had put up some lights along the top, which is pretty cool, so it's illuminated at night, although it's sort of like kind of cone-shaped and a bit strange, but I appreciate that they made it more accessible for more hours by just having it lit up. So I'll talk a little bit about the image. As I said in the video, this is sort of an optimistic idea, an imagination about what our relationship to nature could be. And I'm always sort of optimistic about and hopeful about our ability to imagine a new world, one in which we are more aware about our relationship to nature and also looking to have a more equitable relationship. So there's this sense of a bit of a journey on this, with this boat kind of floating down this strange, magical pink river of sorts. There's a lot of activity happening in this mural that is not centered around human agency. It's looking and seeing the processes that are sort of inherent to nature and the dynamism that already exists there. And I think that kind of close observation is really important for us to learn more about what's happening, to have it be more part of our thoughts and be more present as we sort of continue in our world. And I think just the last thing I wanted to say was my experience throughout the whole process was extremely positive. People would come and ask some questions, and they would be interested in sort of like, why now are murals coming up around the city? They would ask me about other people who are doing murals. And it's kind of funny because I knew all these other people were doing murals, but we were all so busy doing our own that we never got to really like get in touch and sort of see each other work. So it's actually really exciting to meet the other muralists today. But there was one guy who wanted me to paint a wolf on the side of his house, but we never followed through with that. There was no issues about vandalism. There's been no issues as far like I felt very like comfortable and safe throughout the whole time when I was working here, which I really want to share with people, because I think there's sometimes a bit of this idea that you wouldn't be able to do this because there might be some issues with doing work downtown, but it was really wonderful, and I hope to be able to do more in the future. And also, again, a huge shout out to the Allied Arts Council working to make this happen, because that's one thing I would say when people would ask, why are all the murals coming up all of a sudden? I would try to explain to them that there was a group of committed people who really pushed to make this happen. So thanks again.
Thank you, April. So next up we have Leila Armstrong. Leila is an artist and scholar working on her PhD in evolution and behavior at the University of Lethbridge. Leila's work addresses the intersection of wildlife within rural, suburban, and urban landscapes. Working in printmaking, collage, and taxidermy, Leila has an upcoming exhibition at Casa and has a vinyl-wrapped box on the northeast corner of Galt Gardens and another one that will be going up soon on 13th Street. Leila collaborated with Aaron Hagen to produce Buck, which is located on the second floor of the Oliver Building on 5th Street. Please help me welcome Leila Armstrong.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack. I'm going to give a little bit of a background on what my artwork normally looks like. This is the first mural I ever did, so I wanted to show you sort of what I normally do to kind of what inspired the work. So first slide, please. This word is not surprisingly titled coyote. And it was in an exhibition titled Coyote. And what I wanted to do with this piece was to change our relationship to the animal. So instead of the animal being diminished by our presence, I wanted it to loom large over us and our world. So you'll see at the base I have like a miniature kind of habitation. The show included 3 coyotes treated similarly with little habitations on their bases, and then I had trees and other animals on their backs. The exhibition also had some etchings in it and some coyote tails, so I was trying to encourage people to touch the coyote tails and not the coyotes, which seemed to work. It also had some electronic call boxes so that people could, push buttons and create little yelps and yips and howls and stuff. Not just of coyotes, but also of prey. Next slide, please. So my work has long addressed the intersection of nature and culture, concentrating on urban wildlife. And I did a series of lino cuts where I wanted to show urban wildlife as being portrait-worthy. This was from a show I did at the Helen Schuler Nature Center called Backyard Wilderness. And so I had 12 of these portraits, as well as a map that people could pinpoint different animal sightings on. And I also had some photo-based work and 111 clay skunks. So I did a residency here at Casa where I built a bunch of clay skunks, but I didn't stop there. I also invited community members to come and build clay skunks with me. So in the end, we had a total of 111. Next slide, please. So this is from my most recent exhibition called Burrows and Bungalows here at Casa. The work on the left is from a series of collage pieces I did, and I don't know if you can see the text really. It says that the hare is escaping into the wilderness, running for its life. On the right is a taxidermized raccoon rummaging through some trash, and it was in the corner of the room. And then above it in vinyl was the quote that you see below. From nature's point of view, no creatures are useful or not useful. That's just a foolish distinction applied by people. And that's from novelist Olga Tokarczuk. I hope I'm not doing her name too much damage. Next slide, please. So, as alluded to earlier, I'm a big fan of skunks. People that know me know that I'm always trying to redeem them. So the exhibition also included a bunch of skunks. And I just have to do a little plug for skunks here and say they are the urban gardener's friend. They eat things like cutworms and slugs and mice, and they're also darn cute. And they don't want to spray you. It takes 7 to 10 days for them to regenerate their musk, so they'd prefer not to spray you. So that's my plug for skunks. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, I'm a PhD student at the University of Lethbridge in evolution and behavior, and part of my work involves placing trail cameras in people's front and backyards just to see what animals come and visit. And I also did 2 online surveys gauging people's attitudes towards urban wildlife. So next slide, please. This is from a project I did of 6 billboards throughout Lethbridge, and I got funding from the City of Lethbridge Public Small Projects Program grants to do it. And it marries the trail cam images with text quotes from the surveys. Next slide, please. And this is now just kind of moving on, this is the final wrap project that I did at the corner of Galt Gardens, just kitty corner from Chapters. I was part of the pilot project, and I just wanted to do some silhouettes of some animals and have them on this kind of really fun background. Next slide, please. My favorite theorist is American philosopher Alva Noe, and he says that art exhibits us to ourselves, and in doing so gives us the resources to make change. So with this piece, what I was hoping is that people would come across it and maybe pause and consider their relationship to these animals. And I also wanted it to be really fun and pop, which brings me to the next slide, which is my collaborator Erin Hagen's final wrap. And I don't know if you've seen it before. It's at the northwest corner of Casa, and it's called Bolts of Creativity. And this work started off as I think like an 8x10 painting, maybe at the most 9x12, very small, and was blown up and wrapped around this utility box. Next slide, please. So what really attracts me to Aaron's work is not only just his sense of color, but is also his treatment of shape and patterning. And when the call first went out for the mural, I thought, that our approaches are so different that it could be really interesting if we got together and created something. Plus, I really like Aaron as a guy, and he's a good friend. So I asked him if he would be interested in working on a mural. Next slide, please. And he said yes, that he would. So this is just further examples of his work. Next slide, please. Right before we started to design the mural, I had done this drawing of a buck based on one of the trail cam images. And the trail cam image shows a buck that has been eating bird seed off a podium. And so what I wanted to do was take that buck and place it into the coulees. So I had this drawing, and I thought, it could work for the mural. And so I showed it to Aaron, and he thought, yeah, this could really work. So next slide, please. We got together, and I was doing a residency up at the Gushel studio at the time, up in the Crow's Nest Pass. And Aaron came up and brought with him, a schwack of these abstract paintings on paper that were about 11 by 14 maybe. And we spent the day kind of going through all of the paintings and seeing what we thought might work nice with the buck drawing and playing around in Photoshop with it. And what we ended up doing was choosing this particular work and putting it in Photoshop and then taking a prairie sunset and sampling colors from the prairie sunset and transforming the colors of this work. Next slide, please. This is Aaron up on the ladder working on the mural. So at the beginning of the process, we attended a Zoom talk with muralist Jill Stanton, and she went through the process of how she did murals. So all the way from what kind of paint she used to using chalk to draw the image onto the wall. And we really followed her example, and it was quite successful to follow her example. She'd obviously done all the troubleshooting for us, so it really helped to be able to hear what she did and all her steps. So we laid down a base coat and then drew the buck in chalk, and it kept threatening to rain while we were doing this, so we were really frantically drawing it out and then trying to get the paint on as quickly as possible. And it's worth mentioning that Aaron did all the ladder work for the For the mural, I could reach up so far and, you know, did my bit, and then he would finish up the top half. And what was really interesting about that is that we had the drawing that we were putting on the wall on a board, and he couldn't very well hold it and then draw onto the wall. So I would stand at the base of the ladder and describe to him where the lines were supposed to go. So I'd say things like, you know, okay, you're starting at that corner, now you're going down at a 45-degree angle and you're going to meet up with the brick at the bottom like 3/4 of the way over. And this should not have worked. Like, this should have gone terribly awry. But it didn't. He did it. He listened and he drew it on the wall. And it worked out beautifully. And it's kind of surprising, but I think it really speaks to our relationship and the quality of the collaboration. Next slide, please. So here you can see how we approached it very much like a color by number, paint by number. So once we got the drawing up on the wall and painted in, we assigned, you know, our color code to the whole thing and then proceeded to color each section individually, kind of methodically. Next slide, please. And this is when it's getting close to the end. Erin is just doing a bit of touch-up at the top, and I'm beginning to outline the buck in Payne's gray. Next slide, please. And there's Erin doing some outlining on the antlers. And I have, I don't know, 24 pictures of Erin from this angle. I always stood at the exact same spot and took a picture of him. So my images are all like Erin at this angle at various stages. Next slide, please. So this is the finished buck head. And we wanted to, once we had it all painted in, we wanted to outline the buck because it was kind of blending into the background too much. So we felt that if we just added a little gray outline, it would help pull it out from the background, and that really did seem to work. Next slide, please. And that's the finished product. So to conclude, I just wanted to say that the collaboration really did work out really nicely. We would show up together at the same time to work on it and troubleshoot any problems that came up and brainstorm together and listen to music and chat away and work on it. And I really did enjoy working with Aaron. He has a real nice attention to detail and is very hardworking and organized. And you might know him as the clay tech and an instructor here at Casa and as an abstract painter, but in his youth he was also a house painter. So he totally understood the kind of paint that we were using and working at that scale. So I really appreciated that and benefited from it. And just to conclude, I'll say that I would like to thank the Allied Arts Council and the City of Lethbridge. It was a great opportunity. I'm so glad that I was part of the pilot project, and it's so fun to see all the murals around town. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Leila. So up next we have Kylie Fineday. Kylie is a recent graduate from the University of Lethbridge, where she received a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and was also the recipient of the Gold Medal Award, which is awarded to the most outstanding Faculty of Fine Arts student each graduating year. Kylie's material practice includes beadwork, drawing, performance, installation, and video work. And you can actually see some of her work out in the kiosks on Rotary Square. She's got the one that's the North End kiosk. Her work draws on personal and political messages and makes powerful statements about the systemic colonial forces and their influences on generations of individuals and communities. She currently has work, I've already said that piece, great. And her mural, Unreality, is visible on 3rd Ave South, driving east towards Backyard Leisure and the Mango Tree. Please help me welcome Kylie Fineday.
Danse Kylie Fineday Nitsigatsun Nakawachi Uchiniya. Hi, my name is Kylie Fineday. I am Nehiao or Plains Cree, and I grew up in a community in Saskatchewan called Sweetgrass First Nation. First slide, please. So I've lived in Lethbridge off and on, but mostly on since 2015 when I began my academic journey at the University of Lethbridge. Lethbridge is where I found a wonderful and supportive community of art and friendship, and so have stuck around since completing my BFA. Second slide, please. A lot of my art practice involves interaction with the natural world around me. The previous works shown here on this slide closer to me, Earth Blanket, involved a performance using a woven blanket of beads crafted out of clay that I harvested from the river bottom, then returned to the river as an act of reciprocity. The other work of art is a reference to specific landmarks of the community where I grew up in and my childhood home. Next slide, please. When I was accepted for the Mural Pilot Project, I wanted my mural to showcase elements of the local landscape in kind of a new and exciting way that I haven't seen before. This is one of the reference images I used, taken from the top of the coulees near downtown. A favorite lookout point of mine if you pull into the parking lot of the hotel behind A&W. Other reference images include photos taken at other sites and landmarks such as the head smashed in buffalo jump and writing on stone. So elements of the landscape from each of those sites was incorporated into the final design. Next slide, please. This is an image of the original design I submitted. I wanted the elements of the landscape to be recognizable, but to also have some otherworldly qualities. And I feel like I achieved that with the graphic language of the dramatic outlines and shadows, as well as the bright, fantastical color palette. Next slide, please. To execute the mural, I began by drawing a chalk grid on the wall to match a grid that I had digitally imposed onto my original drawing. And I used that as a reference while working on the wall. With the grid as my map, I began plotting the shapes onto the wall and then filling them in, adding more detail layer by layer and sharpening up the outlines. So you can see kind of the first outlines in these two images. Next slide, please. While working on the mural, I carefully monitored the weather each day to ensure working in the most ideal conditions for painting. Like April mentioned, on very hot days, it became difficult to work with the wall, so I would start as early as I could in the morning and avoid working when the afternoon sun was beaming down on the wall, making it too hot and causing the paint to dry too quickly. And I also avoided working on especially rainy or windy days. Next slide, please. My favorite part was finishing up the details and crisping up the edges of the outlines. Also, shout out to my friends who visited, brought cold treats, and offered moral and mural support. I was also visited by plenty of strangers. People just happened to be walking by or visiting some of the nearby businesses, answering a lot of questions about public art in the city and just seeing what I was up to. I was also asked to paint something on someone's fence once, and that also didn't happen. Next slide, please. So the completed mural shown here, following the removal of the scaffolding. Next slide, please. And I also just wanted to extend an expression of gratitude to the city and the Allied Arts Council for the opportunity to add my work to the city's landscape, and to the folks at Backyard Leisure for being wonderful and accommodating to work with throughout that process. Next slide. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kylie. Our last speaker today is Brendan Browne. Brendan is the owner of Nectar Fine Tattooing and Art, which he opened in 2012. With a hyper-realistic and colorful tattoo practice, Brendan has in recent years taken the leap from skin to mural painting, completing work as part of the art collective Rovu on Urban Grocer and behind Gentleman 3 on 3rd Street in Lethbridge, as well as others throughout southern Alberta. His piece is behind his tattoo shop. I'm sure he'll speak to that. And please help me welcome Brendan.
Thank you. I came super prepared, as usual. Something like this, right? The Go-Go Gadget tall guy? Yeah, Go-Go Gadget tall guy. I think that's pretty good. It might be too tall now. Oh, yeah. I'm co-owner of Nectar. I founded it and then was running it into the ground, so I broke it into shares. Yeah, I've been doing murals since I was 15. I took a 10-year hiatus, which lines up with my son being 14. And yeah, I just got back into it more recently through a mutual friend. I met Jared, who owns Rovu, and he's like, I just said yes to this project in a barber shop, and it's like portraits, and can you do any of that? I'm like, oh, I can do all of it, let's go. And then from there, it kind of just caught wildfire. So, and then I was kind of told by Lint in Bracken that there was this project on the go, and I was like, all right, and clearly a side of desk project, but hopefully it's got some mad steam now. Saw the calls for the new one, so I'm excited. I did get a lot of work out of mine, and not a lot came to fruition as well. So that's not uncommon. Let's see what I've got for slides. Okay, yeah, that is a northern flicker, a red-shafted northern flicker. He's local, year-round kind of guy, very industrious. For my prep, I did like a composite. I don't have images of that, but I took images of the site, and mine was a little more easy because it was really site specific. I owned the space and was the artist, so I had a lot of access and could really show and conceptualize the work. But I essentially took an image of that, and then I used a program called Procreate to sort of like illustrate roughly and do a color representation of it, and then superimpose it, composite it together so you can imagine it a little easier. It's nice too to use Procreate because I can hook it up to a projector. So I saw that you were doing a grid system, which is like awesome, but also pretty arduous still on scale. Like one thing if you could measure it with bricks, but I'm still amazed that you and Aaron were able to pull that off. That sounds really impressive. But so I was able to kind of break it down into just my line rendering and then project, so I got the like the size and proportions, right? And I could kind of concentrate on the color layering and the execution of the rest of the space. One thing I love to do is really a site-specific thing, and that transcends into tattooing as well. I've always loved art beyond any edges, and then it becomes about placement and working with the surface, whether it's a person or a wall. So really when I got there, I was like, oh, this is cool. Let's go next slide, see if we can see what I'm about to ramble on about. Yeah, so you can see the edge here, like this, the original cottonwood tree wasn't that total space, and I kind of like freehanded all the stuff underneath the carport. But this one here actually goes into like a break in the wall. I was like, oh, that'd be kind of cool. Like, just work with the space rather than against it. Next slide, see what we got. That's it? Sweet. Okay, great. Short and sweet. This has turned into a really imaginative thing too. I think when people see public art, not only does it kind of like break up the monotony of their day, it creates a sense of kind of ownership and you know, agency in their space. You know, when you make something more vibrant, like I don't think we're really meant to be surrounded by this concrete jungle, right? We have a relationship to nature and place, and I think this speaks to all the artists here, so we've got kind of a lot of similarities in that respect, but the imagination that sort of like happened with it too is people were like, huh, so, you know, what, like, how does this happen? Like, how do we get this? And, you know, so I would talk to them about application. I use exclusively spray paint. But I mean, there's obviously lots of different media you can use to apply murals. But they were also just like fascinated in the process, and lots of selfies with me in a boom, you know, above it. And since then too, it's just been kind of it creates a bit of a hotspot. Like I've went and seen all of your guys' work. And there's almost always someone there looking at it, or doing yoga in front of it, or smoking outside of Sisters sometimes, right? But people are really engaged in the space, and I can say the same too. I'm lucky enough to be able to look at it from the deck. People are shooting magazine photos, wedding photos, grad photos, so that's really, really nice, and I'm sure now that the possibilities are out there for everybody that we'll run with it. We've got some new applicants here, so make it count. I'm looking at you, Danielle. Yeah, besides that, I had an awesome opportunity to teach both a youth and adult spray paint class at Casa. So that was, I'm sorry to all the potters for gassing them out, but hey. Actually, I'm not that sorry, I guess. Guess that's where I'm going with this. But that's another thing too that's like, art is so contagious, right? Like, I mean, you can, you know, strike up someone's imagination, but then to empower somebody, and they'll be like, I don't know if I can do this. But even the kids were pretty like standoffish at first, but by the end too, I had to be like, well, let's save some paints for the adults. Like, this is good. But so it's an awesome opportunity, and I'm eternally grateful for the chance to make art publicly and legally accessible, which is a newer thing for me. But yeah, it's turned into lots of fun projects too. More to come downtown. Got a couple restaurants. Yeah, back of G3. So just scope the alleys. Hopefully we can get some on the kind of front facades of buildings coming up. But we'll see who's daring enough to take that on. Thank you very much.
Wow, okay. You're like mega tall. Okay, we'll try this for a second here. Thank you, Brendan. I'd like to just start off our panel discussion with a question around how each of you approached working with one of the guiding principles from the Public Art Master Plan. So just for reference, that was inclusivity, diversity, accessibility, sustainability, or quality. So if you wouldn't mind just speaking towards that, that'd be wonderful. I'm gonna run and grab you a microphone in just a half a second.
Okay, I'm going to try to remember that list of words. I think sustainability, the content of my mural, and I think a lot of ours, it is about sustainability in that we are trying to reimagine different relationships to nature, new relationships that are more equitable, and that sense of equality is something that touches as well on inclusivity, and it's a non-anthropocentric inclusivity. It's about also an inclusivity of what is not yet here on this planet. I think about other organisms and other children, and we want them to grow up in a world that is still diverse and healthy. Does anybody else have something they want to?
I agree with April. I think that I'd like to echo that sentiment, and that a lot of our work includes references to like the natural world and thinking about our relationship to it. In one of my original concept drawings for my mural design, I included some architecture, and then I decided to remove it, aside from kind of the road, as kind of a pathway for the viewer to kind of situate themselves in that landscape. But yeah, I kind of wanted to focus on just the aspects of the land itself. And in my work outside of being an artist, I work with one of the school divisions as the Indigenous Success Coordinator. So I kind of value a lot of land-based learning and teachings and thinking about the land itself as a teacher. And just kind of, I feel like that's just kind of becomes reflected in a lot of the work that I do. Whether I'm specifically focusing on that intention or not.
I'm good.
So for me, I have a agenda, which of course is that I want people to be able to see their yards and gardens as places where they can coexist with urban wildlife. So that was very much what I had in mind. And then, Aaron's work is very organic, and I thought that it also lended itself to that kind of a message.
Oh, so what we'll do now is if there's questions from the audience, Raya in the back there, who is going to give us a little wave. Perfect. She's got a microphone, so if you have a question, you can put your hand up, and then she'll bring you the microphone to ask it to the panel. And just to reiterate, you can ask that to an individual artist, or if you want them all to take a smattering of answers to it, you can do that too.
You had mentioned that you had, oh, okay. Yes, I don't know your name, I'm sorry. You had mentioned that you used a projector for your imaging to maintain continuity throughout. What kind of projector did you use, and what time of day, quite frankly? Because we've tried utilizing projectors, and holy hell, Batman.
Hello, yes. It's the cheapest POS projector you can get. It is like 1080p, but did it at night, and an epic amount of extension cords for sure. And usually it's only like for a couple elements, like something like the bird that I just really don't have to spend time. Like it's one thing if you're working on like a 1 by 3 foot canvas, to step back from that, pretty straightforward, right? But to step back from a 40-foot wall is pretty difficult. So usually I'll do that just to, in the evening, right? So that I can, and actually what I'll do is I'll invert it. So whereas normally you'd have a white canvas background and you do, dark lines, I'll do the black line rendering and then I'll just invert it, which is a thing you can do with Photoshop, Illustrator. I use Procreate, which is just, I draw on the iPad. And that actually makes it easier to see too, because then it kind of like creates a sort of a blocked in shadow essentially, and then highlights where the lines are in white. Yeah. So, but I think any projector really that's, more than 1080p or something like that, like should be fine, which you can, I can't even remember where I got it, but probably borrowed from the U of L. Yeah, I think. But it's broken now, so they can't have it back.
And my question comes from a perspective of being a non-painter and my experience in blending paints, which was traumatizing, to say the least. So I'm curious, in your initial, before you got to the wall, what colors changed for you? with regards to the light that came onto the space, with regards to the surrounding space around it? Were there sort of challenges or surprises that you had with specifically regards to color?
Well, I think that's always sort of subject to change too, and especially when you do, larger scale work or something, like there is some magic that happens in the moment, or supply chain issues as well. But you might find too, like your initial plan maybe digitally has, like there would be lighting. Like I know for a fact, yours faces north, both your guys' faces east, right? So you get a lot of sun on it all the time. That's probably why it was so hot to apply it. So those are some things to consider too, right? Like if you digitally I do it and it looks like it's fine, but then a lot of mine was quite dark all the time. Like it faces north, but is protected from kind of the late in the day. So I was like, well, to create that vibrancy, then I decided to use some of those yellows and oranges behind the flicker. That, and because there was a lot of similar earth tones in order to create contrast, not only with like light and dark, but also contrast between like color theory relationships, right? So, something that's a teal needs kind of an orange to sort of really make them both pop together.
I don't think that my color palette changed too much from my original design. I did paint myself a little sample palette of each of the colors that I used in my concept drawing, which I painted it on paper to the same dimensions as the wall, translating feet into centimeters. And I took those samples to the paint store and tried to match them as close as I could with the paint colors that they had. I went with Sherwin-Williams and used kind of the highest quality outdoor paint that I could get from them. They did have to do a little bit of problem solving to help me get the right color for the orange color, but they were really helpful with that in kind of modifying one of their pre-existing paint chip colors for me. And then, I think that with the dark black outlines that I use, it kind of really helped the colors pop and stand out. There were different kind of opacity levels to some of the paints just because of the bases that they needed to use for the colors, so I had to kind of work around figuring out how many layers I needed of each color to get a good coat over the gray wall that I was working on. But yeah, that was kind of my experience with the figuring out the color and translating the design to the physical paint.
Yeah, we similarly didn't really change our color palette very much. We chose it based on the prairie sunset notion and took in the sample into the paint store and had them match up as best as possible. And then while we were working on site, the light did change throughout the day, but we didn't find it to be in any way a problem. For us, we came to realize that we had to do some outlining on the buck to just make it distinguish from the background. But that was about it.
So when I first painted my sort of preparatory work, I was using colors that have names, so like viridian hue, yellow ochre. And so when I'm ordering colors from Golden, they have mural paints. They have like a set of 5, colors, and then a viridian hue and a French ultramarine. So I ordered the colors that I already used, which made it pretty easy. And then working on a gray wall, I found really ideal because whatever color you put on a gray, it's just already going to kind of pop with a vibrancy. And then in terms of throughout the painting process, I tried to kind of stick with if I had like a yellow patch here, then there's a green patch next to it, and I would try to match it a little bit. But I'm really, again, not considering this as much as I am what it actually looks like. And so I think just a lot of my previous sort of skills with color mixing, making sure that I've got, like Brendan was saying, you're sort of working with
color theory, if there's yellows, certain kinds of yellows, like, you know, you're kind of getting greens next to it where they're going to both kind of pop where you want them to pop. So.
Any of you guys have any concerns about UV exposure to the paints because it causes fading? I know we've experienced that previously, so I'm just wondering for any of your pieces that might have direct sunlight exposure all day long, that's a risk here in Lethbridge.
For sure, this was something I was concerned about, and I ordered from Golden. They have protective varnish that it's protectant against UV, but it also makes it pretty easy to clean up if there is graffiti. And it was these two huge buckets that I ended up getting, and you have to like mix them together in a certain ratio, and it covered almost all of it except for a little bit. And then I was able to go to Michael's and get like the spray paint version to just touch up like the equivalent of like, you know, a 2 by 2 foot sort of area. But they do have a UV protectant in there, so you know these won't fade. Of course, it's no outdoor mural is gonna last forever. There's sort of I don't know what, we'll see how long these all sort of last. A long time, I hope, but it's probably going to fade regardless. We'll sort of see.
Yeah, we weren't too concerned. We used the highest quality of paint that we could get, but we just also accepted that over time it is going to fade. It's going to change over time, and that's just part of what happens with murals.
I pretty much echo that sentiment. I did do a lot of research and try to find some sort of protective UV coating. I went from paint store to paint store and talked to expert, and I even went to an art store in Calgary. And then, when it came down to it, it was I was assured by the paint store where I got my paint from that I was getting the highest quality for outdoor use, and also the fact that it is an outdoor mural and exposed to the elements and sunlight, that it will likely fade over time, but I think that's just the nature of it.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about a little nice wear and tear as well. But it's also like something you consider as like surface management, right? So these guys like working on cinder or brick is one thing. It's like semi-porous. Like mine was like troweled on stucco. So really, really deep, right? So there's not a lot you can do in terms of spray for that. I use a product called Vanguard if it is cinder block or a prepped, like primed wall, which is really, really good. Vandal Guard. So it's meant to protect against art, but also protects art. And even that too, really like, there's always potential outliers, or if someone puts like oil-based anything on that, it's not gonna be able to be removed. Mine is not so much, I was worried about the sun, but it's actually a total wind tunnel in that area there. And when you paint stuff that goes all the way down to ground level, you're gonna see all sorts of stuff like kick up from vehicles. My garbage pad has absolutely destroyed a lot of it too. But the option too is in a couple of years I get all those tones all the time and do this semi-professionally, so I can always touch it up. But yeah, I think that goes without saying that you want the highest quality that you can, but some stuff's just like environmentally like out of your control. Like I use loop spray paint, which is like, I use that exclusively because it has this NC formula that's lower VOCs, so it's not as toxic to breathe in. And also it just has this formula that has like a UV protectant in it. So, yeah, but loop. Yeah, it's one of the big five, but loop is awesome because there's only 2 places to get it in North America, or at least at a wholesale level, and one is Calgary. So Aaron, who runs the whole North American division, is Los Angeles and Calgary. So And he's the reason why Calgary's got all these massive bump festivals, and I think we have the biggest mural in, for sure, North America, if not like the top 3, that just got painted 2 years ago. So he's an awesome resource for that as well. But yeah, Loop has I think the best palette out of any of the big 5 spray paint companies, and their formula is safer and has UV protected in it. So I would suggest. I'll hold this.
I was asked by my student to ask a question, so it's fair. My question is, as muralists, what hopes do you have for your art in relationship to the spaces that they're in? What are your hopes for the relationships that your art to have with the spaces that they're in now that they're in place?
Well, I mean, I kind of mentioned this in the interview too, when people are like, well, what if people don't like it? I'm like, that's awesome. That's the role of syntax, or kind of creating a formula with your art. Like, whether you have the preconceived notions or an agenda or whatever is one thing, but you sort of forfeit that when the viewer takes up the other role. So, I mean, I guess just thought, or to sort of break up, like so much of our lives is like looking down at our phone and kind of we're not really like invested in our space. So it's just nice to break that up a little bit. And even if people don't like it, well, they had to think about that. So that syntax for me is important.
Yeah, I also mentioned in the video that one of my hopes, I guess, for people interacting with the mural is that they recognize some of the landscape elements that I referenced, and yeah, I think I also got a lot of positive feedback while I was working on it by people kind of walking by saying just this is so great to see in our city, and walking up and down, it's a pretty busy street on 3rd Avenue. So yeah, I think just kind of breaking up the gray kind of monotone quality of most of the architecture with some pops of art is great.
I really like our location. It's on a patio, and so it's kind of like a little bit of an oasis. And so I think that people get to spend more time with the work because of that. There's people doing yoga there. There's people that go out and, have a smoke out there, have a beverage and stuff. And so I really appreciate the fact that people are going to get to spend more time with it and also repeatedly use the space. So they'll get a really good look at it and over time maybe, think about it a bit.
It's a really excellent question. And I think that downtown, you have just, it's all, a lot of it's just commercial kind of stuff, right? There's a little bit of public space here and there, but it's a lot of commercial, a lot of business stuff. And by having something downtown or just in a commercial business sector that is not related to business and it's not advertising, it sort of is a bit of a reminder that these are living spaces, and these are things that are not connected to just housing or sort of commercial interests. It's about the experiences that we have day to day, and that can get kind of lost, I think, when we're just when we're so busy. And there's something interesting about a lot of the spaces with these murals. They're in alleys, they're sort of off the beaten path. They're in those sort of shortcut areas, which maybe speaks a bit to it's a very personal experience to be walking through the alley. It's not like a sanctioned places that are you're told to walk this way. So there's something about calling attention to these places that are not sanctioned and so sort of obvious in that way. But one thing I would love to do is to turn that question back on some of the audience members, because as artists, I think we're very aware of when we do see art in places and we relate to it maybe in a different way because we're bringing the experience of us as artists. But I would love to hear how community members feel when, you know, they see a space and then they see the space after this mural has come up. You know, what does that change for you? And if there's any sort of experience or something to that matter that someone is comfortable sort of talking about, that'd be great to hear.
Oh man, I don't want a microphone. I sound really bad in a microphone. I think it's really awesome. I love what is happening. I like pretty much the only thing I like about the big city like Calgary is the color and the more interesting things to look at. So I think it's really cool what all you guys are doing. I hope to do one day. And yeah, just like color, just putting color everywhere. That's kind of one of my missions and professions, and I love to see it.
I think that's actually a really nice point to stop on, because we have launched the next iteration of the community mural program. Oh, just kidding. There's a hand up in the crowd from Jillian Bracken.
Sorry, Katie, we should have coordinated I just feel so compelled to speak. It's great to hear that you all had such a positive experience doing this. It's so wonderful to hear how appreciative you were for these opportunities. I want to say that to you. On behalf of the City of Lethbridge and the Allied Arts Council, thank you for all of your work and for sharing your time and your talents with the city. The word pilot is really just another word for experiment. And thankfully, this experiment was a huge success, and you guys are a big part of that. It ticked so many boxes: local artists engagement, the vast majority of the artists in the pilot project were local, and providing emerging artists or artists who maybe had never done this type of work with an opportunity to try that. And it worked, and as Katie mentioned, that we're going to do it again. So thank you for laying the groundwork for what hopefully will be a long-term successful program for the city. There is, something that's missing, I think, from this beautiful video, and I feel like we could do another one, and I hope we do a lot more, because what a great way to tell the story. One thing that's missing from this is really the context, and kind of what was going on at the time when you guys installed these beautiful pieces of artwork. This pilot project was launched right after COVID turned the world upside down. And I think that took what would have been a powerful project anyway, at any time, and made it even more powerful. Because these murals were accessible in a way that at that time, a lot of other artwork wasn't. And it took that accessibility and the importance of art to a whole different level, because we had lost things that we never ever thought could be taken away from us. The other thing too is that this was a major kind of point in history, I think, for the city, lowercase c, and the city, capital C, in that we'd never seen tax support for these kinds of murals and investments of those tax dollars into facilities that the city doesn't own. And what a scary but exciting thing to do. And the partnerships were great. And we look forward to going through that kind of matchmaking process again with this next call, because those public-private partnerships are very important. And you guys were wonderful, wonderful kind of advocates for the program, and will continue, I'm sure, to be stewards of the work that you've done and this investment that you've made in the creative architecture of the city. The other thing too is that alongside this pilot project, we saw changes to the city's land use bylaw to make murals hopefully easier and cheaper to install, and that you don't need to get a development permit for a mural that meets the definition in the land use bylaw. But now there is a definition. And again, you guys, you made that happen, right? You helped us make the case for why it was important for that, those kind of restrictions, that red tape to be minimized. So thank you again for that. A huge thank you to the Allied Arts Council as well for organizing tonight and for all the work in helping make this pilot project happen. It wouldn't have been possible without you guys. So anyway, thank you to the artists. Thank you to everyone here.